There is a chart from the U.S. Energy Information Administration that looks like a recording error, a flat line running for decades. Then around 2009, it bends and shoots straight up. That line is American oil production. By 2015, the United States was pulling more crude than almost any country on earth, and selling some of it for $20 a barrel, less than the world price. The country was drowning in its own oil and taking a discount to get rid of it. In 2015, Congress repealed a 40-year-old law to fix that problem. Exports surged, the discount shrank. On paper, the crisis was over. But one oil man from Oklahoma, Hamm, had been arguing for years that the mismatch was not an accident. And if he was right about that, then the fix Congress passed might not have fixed anything at all. To see how a country ends up fighting its own oil supply, you start with a BET, not Hamm's bet, a bet the refineries made 20 years earlier. American oil production peaked in 1970. For the next 4 decades, it fell, and every serious forecast said the same thing. Domestic crude was a declining asset. The light, easy oil was running out. So the refiners on the Gulf Coast made what looked like the only rational call. If American light crude was disappearing, the future belonged to heavy, sour crude, the thick, high-sulfur oil coming up from Venezuela and later from Canada's oil sands and Mexico's heavy fields. Heavy crude was cheaper to buy because it is harder to process. Venezuela alone sat on one of the largest heavy oil deposits on the planet. And through the 2000s, the bet looked right. American production kept falling, heavy imports kept growing, and the refiners looked like they had read the market perfectly. So they doubled down. They spent billions installing cokers, the massive units that crack the heaviest tar-like bottom of the barrel into usable fuel. The coking capacity on the Gulf Coast roughly doubled in 15 years. That is not a hedge. That is a commitment. By the late 2000s, the Gulf Coast had the most complex refining system in the world, tuned for a barrel of crude that kept getting heavier every year. That decision was built on the best information available. The information was about to become worthless because a different kind of oil man changed the inputs. Hamm, youngest of 13 children, son of an Oklahoma sharecropper, founded Continental Resources at 21. He helped prove that horizontal drilling and hydraulic fracturing could pull commercial volumes of oil from dense shale rock in places like the Bakken of North Dakota. Within a few years, shale turned the United States from a country everyone assumed was running dry into one of the largest producers on the planet. Production nearly doubled between 2009 and 2015. Bakken, then Eagle Ford, then the Permian. And here is the detail that almost everyone missed. Shale does not produce heavy, sour crude. It produces light, sweet crude, the exact opposite of what the Gulf Coast spent 20 years and billions of dollars configuring for. American refineries are tuned for an API gravity around 33. Shale was coming out at 40 or higher. Push too much light crude through a refinery built for heavy, and your throughput drops, your cokers sit half idle. The country's drilling boom and its refining system were pulling in opposite directions, but that was only the first jaw of the trap. There was a second one, and it had been locked in place since 1975. After the Arab oil embargo, when the great fear was scarcity, Congress banned the export of American crude. A law written for shortage, still on the books 40 years later, was now locking in a surplus nobody had imagined. Producers sitting on mountains of light oil could not ship it overseas to the refineries that were actually built for it. Canada was the only real buyer. So the crude piled up at the Cushing storage hub in Oklahoma, and the price collapsed. By 2011, WTI was trading as much as $20 a barrel below the Brent World benchmark. Think about that for a second. The country was producing more oil than it had in a generation, and the market was punishing it for every barrel. That discount had a price tag, $20 a barrel, leaking out of the producing states every year because of a quality mismatch and a law from the era of gas lines. Harold Hamm was not going to let that stand. He co-founded the Domestic Energy Producers Alliance, DEPA, and took the argument straight to Congress. His case was straightforward. The ban was forcing American oil to be sold cheap into a refining system that did not even want it. Then Hamm said the thing people still argue about. He claimed foreign companies had deliberately converted American refineries to run their heavy sour crude, that they had, in his words, taken over America's refining capacity without firing a shot. A farmer raising cotton he couldn't get ginned. That was the story the public was handed. But the refiners had their own coalition, and they called Hamm's takeover claim a red herring. Reasonable people, reasonable cases, both sides. But what nobody on either side was asking, and this is the part that matters for where this story ends up, is whether lifting the ban would actually fix the mismatch or just move it somewhere else. If you want the actual mechanism behind stories like this, not the headline version, that is the whole reason this channel exists. Hit subscribe. On December 18, 2015, buried inside a massive spending bill, Congress repealed the ban. Hamm is widely credited as the man who led that charge. The effect was immediate. Exports went from under 500,000 barrels a day to nearly 3 million by 2019. The WTI discount narrowed. Producers could finally sell to the world. The mismatch was solved. At least that is the version most people heard, the version that leaves out what happened next. The mismatch was never fixed. It was exported. The United States still runs refineries built for heavy crude, so it still imports heavy crude, mostly from Canada, every single day. And it still produces light shale crude those refineries do not want, so it ships that oil overseas. Today, the country is simultaneously one of the world's largest crude importers and one of its largest crude exporters. That is not abundance. It is a structural split that was never reconciled. The 2015 repeal did not close the gap. It built a worldwide plumbing system around it. That means the whole system now depends on that plumbing holding together. And most people outside the industry never connect what happened next. The refiners' original bet assumed Venezuelan heavy crude would always be available. It is not. Venezuela's production collapsed from over 3 million barrels a day to under 1 million barrels a day. One of the key feedstocks the cokers were built for largely vanished, which pushed the entire system to lean harder on a single source, Canadian heavy crude. Canada now supplies the majority of crude imported by the United States, and most of what it sends is heavy. If those Canadian imports get disrupted by a pipeline fight, a trade dispute, anything, the most complex refining system on Earth goes short on the one thing it was designed to swallow. The mismatch is not a history lesson. It is a live vulnerability. So, Hamm's accusation, the takeover that happened without a shot. Look at the timing, honestly. Those refiners installed their cokers when every credible forecast said American light crude was finished. They were not plotting against shale. Shale did not exist yet as a serious force. They made a rational bet on the information they had, and the bet was wrong. The refineries did not steal anything. They guessed. And a sharecropper's son from Oklahoma changed the answer after the money was already spent. The difference is that Hamm changed what the chart said. The refiners just had to live with it. Hamm called it a takeover. What it really was the most expensive guess in the history of American industry, made by people reading the same charts everyone else was reading. So here's what I want to know. Put yourself in a refinery boardroom in 2004. Every forecast says American oil is running out. Do you make the same bet on heavy crude? And is the Canadian dependence just the next version of the same guess? If you worked one of those Gulf Coast units through the conversion, or you traded the WTI discount when it blew out, or you remember when the Bakken was the only story in energy, tell me in the comments.